All right. Good morning. We'll get started, and hopefully some more people can join as we get closer in. I know that we've rescheduled this a little bit earlier, so so it may be some people will come in a little bit later. We're very pleased to have with us today Ulrika Richardson, the Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Haiti, who is here to talk about the situation in that country. You can see her on the screen right now. Good morning, Ms. Richardson. How are you doing? Hold on. Wait a second. We need some help with your volume so we can hear you. Can you put your volume up, please? Okay. Please go ahead and we'll see whether this works.
Okay.
Great.
Good morning. Okay, it's better. Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Please, if you have anything to say up front, we'll get started with that before we turn over to questions.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot again for having me today. It's been a while. I remember I was briefing you back in December, physically, in fact, and I would like to use this opportunity to update you on some of the key developments since then. As you've seen, and what prompted today's briefing to you is that yesterday we launched the government of Haiti, as well as the humanitarian community, and obviously the humanitarian country team. We launched the humanitarian response plan for Haiti for this year. And as you know, this launch comes at a very critical time for Haiti. Unfortunately, since we last spoke in December, the situation in Haiti has only deteriorated. And in fact, what we can see from a humanitarian point of view is that now more than almost half of the population, it's about 5.2 million people that are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. And in fact, if you look at this figure, it's a doubling since over the last 5 years. So it is quite dramatic. And so if you see this in terms of the context here, is that first of all, the people need of protection assistance has doubled in 1 year. So that is something that we need to bear in mind, because this is a humanitarian crisis, but it's actually above all a protection crisis, right? And then we've seen also the number of acts of armed violence against schools has increased by 9 in 1 year. And that is really worrying, particularly if you think of the impact on children that this crisis is having. We have half of the population is facing high levels of food insecurity, and that is a figure that has almost quadrupled since 2017. A quarter of the households in the country don't use safe drinking water. We call that it's unimproved water sources for drinking, which obviously has its own impact in terms of health implications. We also see a very dramatic increase of internal displacements due to the violence provoked by the gangs. So it has increased by 50% in the commune of Port-au-Prince since November last year. And we see that the majority of these people, they have fled their homes because of the violence, right? And so what these numbers, of course, when we talk about numbers, we should never forget that it's about people. It's about children, about women, about men, about the young sort of generations here in Haiti. So all of the, there are people behind these numbers. But also, as they indicate, is that insecurity and the violence is the major concern right now. So we can actually safely say that armed gangs control, either directly or indirectly, a majority of the metropolitan Port-au-Prince. And that they really, and the gang activities, often armed, includes murder, sexual violence, including very brutal incidents of gang rape, which often, unfortunately, is done against, obviously, women, mostly young women, and it's done public spaces and sometimes even during the light of day. Kidnapping is also on the rise, and so this is part of the reality that Haitians face every day. So basically, the fact of not being able to leave their homes without being in constant fear, bringing their children to school, going about their normal life. There is a lot of limitations on what we could call a normal life here in the capital. And what we also observe with the gangs, and which we are paying particular attention to, is the use of children as part of their operations. So that the use of children in their operations, as well as the use of tactics like gang rape, is very worrying. We also see how the violence is now spreading outside of Port-au-Prince, so in the Northeast Department, Artibonite, and you will hear more about that. We did a press statement about that a few weeks ago, because it is, again, a very worrying trend that we see the spread of the violence. And let's remember that Artibonite was once the breadbasket of Haiti. We also see gangs operating in the south. And so if we add to this very grim picture and very tragic picture, we also know that many Haitians are trying to find a better life outside of Haiti. And they go to great extent and great risk to do so. And we also see that last year, the number of Haitians repatriated from Dominican Republic increased by 6 as compared to the year before, which again says a lot about the flux and the movement of people and the complexity that brings with it, and the suffering that people face. So yes, so this is, it paints a very somber picture of the situation, and that is probably an understatement. And that's why we have opted for a very ambitious humanitarian response plan for this year. And this ambitious plan is also based on the fact that despite the very difficult operational environment that we as humanitarians face, we have access. We can deliver humanitarian assistance. And so we have access to some of those hard-to-reach areas. In fact, we did, just to give an example, between October last year and January this year, we did close to 100 emergency missions to those very hard-to-reach areas. And so this plan, so this is something that we obviously count on to maintain this space and also to be able to expand it. So we count on that as we have developed our humanitarian response plan, which was launched yesterday, which is very ambitious, but it's also realistic in this sense. So the plan aims to reach 3.2 million people in need, and that is with humanitarian and protection assistance. And this is out of the 5.2 million that I mentioned initially that are in need of humanitarian assistance at the time. And so the plan has 2 key objectives. One is to support people with life-saving, multi-sectoral assistance and protection, but also to build people and institutions' resilience to shocks. So this is also how we see very much the linkage to longer term. And I will come back later to that, because humanitarian is very much a short-term response, and we know that that we need to build into our response a much longer-term vision. So, but for the short-term response, for the humanitarian assistance, and for the plan to be successful, there be 4 conditions that are absolutely essential. First, obviously, unhindered humanitarian access, and which is a sine qua non for effective humanitarian action. Second, a more accountable and people-centered action, which actually put local actors in the driving seat. And here I'm proud to say that our plan was developed with close to 100 different local organizations, community-based organizations. And we're very proud of that, and I put a lot of value on that. Thirdly, early and increased funding. And here, of course, is a big crux of the matter, right? But we need it urgently. For example, it's such a thing that we have a new agricultural season that just started. And so we need money for this to be able to respond to that one, because that could then of course, impacted food security. And then we need a greater global coverage of the humanitarian crisis, and here your role is absolutely essential. So the budget for this plan is 720 million, which is more than the double than last year, and it's the highest that we've seen in the country, the highest value for an HRP in Haiti since the tragic 2010 earthquake. So we are acutely aware of the financial investment that will be required and the effort that goes with it. And we also know that Haiti is a part of a list of many countries in the world that face complex crises. So, but still to say that the plan here is quite unique, because what Haiti is facing right now is a unique crisis, meaning we have levels of violence that are unprecedented. We have levels of humanitarian needs, including, for example, food insecurity, that is unprecedented. And I think with this, we really have very strong arguments that now is the time to show solidarity with Haiti. But also to say that from a more operational point of view, that the budget is also increased because we have a considerable and increase also in the cost of departments, of our operations, both to move around, but also in terms of the cost levels here, the inflation, etc. So I think there is a lot of good reasons for the increase of the budget, but the most important here is the global solidarity. And so, so what I would like to say is that the importance here, and I think Haitians, the many Haitians that I speak to on a daily basis are very aware, and I think here we learn a lot from the past, is that humanitarian assistance is a short-term, let's say, support, but it has to be coupled with addressing some of the structural root causes like corruption, like impunity, and like an economic model that is really not nor egalitarian nor particularly productive. So with that, we are also then signing our United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework next week. That is, if the humanitarian response plan is a one-year plan, our cooperation framework is a 5-year strategic plan that we will sign with the government, also been developed with national partners primarily. And that will actually have be able to basically form those linkages between the humanitarian and the development, but also then, of course, with the political work and the good offices of what the mission is doing here. So just very briefly before I finish, to say that this cooperation framework that we are signing has 4 key priorities, and you will see how they very much are linked both to the structural root causes, but also to the humanitarian situation. So the first one is on governance, security, rule of law. Second priority is on the economic situation, the economic model here that needs to be based on local production, needs to be basically stimulating that local production, creating jobs, and be able to reverse the negative growth that the country is seeing for the 5th consecutive year, by the way. And the third priority is making sure that there is equitable, qualitative, accessible basic social services. And also that we work on this very, very important social contract between people, the population, and the state, institutions, public institutions. And then the fourth, obviously, in a country like Haiti, you can't ignore the fact that here it's a high-risk environment from a natural disaster point of view. So, of course, this multidimensional risk management is a very important component of our plan. And with that comes climate work. It comes also territorial development. So, with those two together, and obviously in concert with national institutions, with the local civil society, the private sector here, as well as with the international community, we have now a robust basis on which we can address both the emergency, the urgent, critical needs of the population, but also addressing those medium to long-term development deficits. So with that, I stand ready for your questions. Over.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll now turn the floor over to questions. James.
Sorry. James Bays from Al Jazeera on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association. Thank you for doing this briefing. I've got a couple of questions. First, on access. You said you do have access, so I'm just trying to work out how you have access. I mean, are you doing deals with gangs to let you pass? Are you using boats? Are you using aerial delivery of aid? Can you tell us how you are getting the aid in to these places? Second part of that question, the Secretary General has called for a police strike force to deal with the security situation. No countries have stepped up for that. But what could that mean for the humanitarian situation and the work you do if that force was to be stepped up? And are you going to solve the security problems which lead to the humanitarian problems unless something like that is stepped up? And then the second thing I wanted to ask you about was funding. You talk about your ambitious plan for a unique crisis, but how were you funded last year? And how are you going to get the message out when there are so many other demands on the international community?
Thank you very much, James. I hope you can still hear me. So yes, on access. Access is done through various means. First is that we have a long tradition in this country. The UN has been in Haiti. We have let's say, a relationship with local populations. So I think that helps us, obviously. We are working with local organizations. We are working with many community-based organizations. We are working with local leaders so that we can make sure that we have this unhindered humanitarian access. We don't have unhindered, by the way. I have to say that we have access. We would like to have more. We would like to have, of course, have a much broader accessibility to the populations, but we have it through the contacts that we have with local populations, as I said, community leaders. We also use UNHA's transport to go to the south and to the north. So that's, unfortunately, a lot of our mobility is done through helicopters. We also use barges, meaning boats, the maritime transport, which is not free of problem, because there is also a lot of the gangs that have established themselves in and around the port and the coastline. So, but we use varying means. And of course, one day, one mean is possible, but the next day we have to shift strategy. So what we also do is that in the UN system, and we have an access group, which is UN agencies, but also local organizations, NGOs. And sorry, there's something on my screen. Is that, you can still hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you. Sorry about that strange screen.
Yes. So in our access group, it's a small knitted group that share information. For example, how does it look in Cité Soleil? How does it look in Martissan today? How is Artibonite? And then we use whoever has the best access means in those areas. They take the lead in organizing an operation. So this well-knitted access team and strategy is really helping us to make sure that we can do operations. But as I said, they are not risk-free, and some days we have to abort an operation and say, listen, today we don't go. So that's one thing. On the police strike force, yes, the SG, the Secretary General, responded to the Prime Minister's call last year for international specialized assistance in terms of addressing security. And still that question is being discussed at the Security Council level. So it is with member states, actually. And it's still being discussed. No one, as you rightly said, it's a discussion about who takes the lead, what is the composition, and that is as much as we know currently. Obviously, we see that violence and insecurity is a fundamental factor here. But and I have to say this, that we, in the meantime, we have to operate on the ground, because people are literally facing the risk of dying of hunger. We have the rainy season coming. We may get a resurgence of the cholera, etc. So I think that we just have to find a way of operating while the country is waiting for this support. On funding, last year, we actually, and this is what gives me a little bit of optimism, we managed to get a higher level of funding for our humanitarian response plan than we had done in past years. This could, of course, be explained by the resurgence of cholera, but we were funded closely to 50% of our plan. Obviously, we would have liked much more, but if we can see an increasing trend, people understanding that the situation in Haiti is urgent, is critical, and that if Haiti is not supported now, then the situation will turn worse, right? So I think there is that realization, and I have great confidence in that donors will realize that it is now that Haiti needs a solidarity. Let's also remember that we are not talking about a huge population. So it is, in fact, in terms of proportions, I think it can go a long way with quite a if we get a robust collective response to that. So that's what I can. Yes. So what we will do is we will try and visit capitals. We will work through obviously member states. We will also make sure that we are that we do everything we can in order to increase efficiency. As I said, we build a lot on each other's strength. Working with local organizations, but we have to do a lot of work also with capitals to make sure that Haiti is on the agenda, not just today, but every day.
Thank you. Margaret Bashir?
Hi, thanks, Ms. Richardson, for taking the time to talk to us. Just two questions. I just did a little quick Google search, and it says the harvest season is June to September and in Haiti. And I'm wondering, are farmers able to work in their fields since the gangs are spreading to other parts of the country, including Arbanite? And are they facing intimidation or extortion by gangs? Since there's such a serious food insecurity problem, will Haiti be able to continue to try and feed itself? And my second question is on the Vero fuel terminal. Are things smoothly functioning since it was reopened?
Thank you, Margaret. Yes. So on the agricultural, yeah, you're right. They have two seasons here. The second season is starting now, or the first, however you see it. Now there are places, obviously, like in the south, where farmers can work. They have been facing a drought as of now. Right now, we're actually in a quite unusual rainy period. I think it's either a delay. We had normally a short rainy period in January, February, but the rains only came now. So that may help. But what they need is that they need support in terms of seeds. They need input into their agricultural activity. They need access to credit. They need equipment, etc. And this is what I also meant, and this is what we as UN and other actors, we provide, right? For us, it's difficult, and for the farmers, to be able to move goods from the capital to the south, because the gangs are basically blocking the national road to the south. So those are some of the hurdles that limit the activities of the farmers. Similarly, they cannot access the market in the capital, right? So you can see already how let's say the gangs hold on the capital is impacting the entire country. So in the south, there is more about the operational difficulties than actually the violence difficulties. We have hopes that with the rain, they can actually increase their agricultural productivity. But let's remember that Haiti, during many years, I mean, in fact, in the 1980s, it substituted local food production with food imports, right? They liberalized the trade. So here we need to really see that's where the linkage, for example, with the mid and long-term development, let's say, ambitions becomes so very important. In Artibonite, it's a different situation. In Artibonite, the farmers have a real difficulty of operating because of the gangs. And so this is what we're currently looking at. In terms of, but it's absolutely essential for let's say, food security, that the local production increases and intensifies. It would also bring with it benefits. It would bring, you know, local families' income. It could bring enormous benefits to a lot of the agricultural, let's say, organizations that exist. So it has multiple benefits. Fuel terminal is functioning. The Vareux, not without problem. There is a problem because of the economic situation of the country and also with security around the port and that particular terminal. We don't have a steady flow of fuel, but there is fuel in the country, a lot of it though on the black market, and imports still can happen and let's say trucks leaving the terminal. Thank you.
Jacqueline Charles.
Yes, hi. Good morning. Thank you for doing this. We're seeing a lot of reports. Thank you. We're seeing a lot of reports of people, even in the mountains of Port-au-Prince, you know, well-to-do, having to flee, you know, their homes. And I'm just wondering, what kind of pressure is this putting on? Because you all have been dealing a lot with people sort of at the bottom rung who have been displaced. I think it's over 100,000. But now that you're even having middle and upper class folks who are also having to flee, not being able to work, I mean, what kind of pressure is this putting on the humanitarian sector? And if the international community does not respond, what is the worst case scenario do you see happening here?
So thank you, Jacqueline. I didn't get the first part of your question, but I think I believe I know what you're referring to. Yes. So the part of, for those who don't know, Port-au-Prince, part of the affluent, let's say, middle class or upper middle class live on the hillsides. And yes, these are now also affected by gangs. And so we see that people are leaving their homes, and that sort of the livable area of Port-au-Prince is shrinking. Obviously, people in the middle class, they find other means of coping. Many of them, as I know, at least people that I talk to, they send their children to schools outside of the country. Many of them place their businesses out of the country. So that's one of the coping mechanisms. Many then would stay with families in the different departments. But what we're also seeing is the increase of community self-defense groups. So actually populations, communities, neighborhoods taking security into their own hands. And this is something that we would need to watch very, very closely as we go forward. The worst case scenario, Jacqueline, I don't even want to speculate on that. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. Dulcie Lineback.
Hi, I'm Dulcie Lineback from Pass Blue. I have a couple of questions. When does the new envoy arrive, the woman from Ecuador? And
okay, that's your question?
That's one of a few. So how do you work with the gangs? I mean, how do you manage the situation? Because obviously they're a big player in the country. And also, how do you anticipate working with the new human rights expert who was just named, Bill O'Neill, who's actually from Brooklyn? And then also in the leaks coverage, there was a report that the Wagner Group offered Haiti some help in security. So I wonder if you know about this or if you can comment on it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very I'll take the easiest first. So the new SRG, Maria Isabel Salvador, from Ecuador. She's currently in New York on briefings, and she will arrive. I will meet her at the airport tomorrow here in Port-au-Prince. So she's coming to the country tomorrow. On the gangs, so humanitarian access is obviously it's based on principles. It's humanity above all. It's about neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So when we talk about humanitarian action, it has to be carried out based on the needs, right? So that means that if we see that in Cité Soleil, whether it's in Boston or Brooklyn, one of those quartiers, that we have let's say malnutrition, cholera, etc., or for example, people having been wounded or victims of gang rape, then obviously we have to act. And that means that we have a different scale in terms of engagement, but obviously we try with normal means, we try with local community leaders, and so we simply have to find means of reaching people in need. What we are trying to do right now is to respond to the worrying trend of increased attacks on medical staff, and you've seen it in the media. Doctors, medical doctors going about saving, doing their noble profession, carrying out their noble profession and mandate, as well as teachers. So we've seen access on these health and education facilities. And this is what we also now try to raise the awareness across the board, that this is completely against any international minimal norm it's against any international minimum norm. So that's what I can say on that. We are very pleased with the nomination of Bill O'Neill. He's he knows Haiti very well. We have still not had a direct interaction with him. He was nominated, I believe, 2 days ago. We look forward to working very closely with him. This crisis is a multidimensional crisis in Haiti. Very much of it is, as I mentioned initially, a protection crisis, anchored into a really profound human rights crisis. So he's very much welcome. We look forward to working with him. On Wagner, I think this was, it was in the media. We've not been able to validate. So I have no comments on that. Thank you.
Great. I don't see any hands up anymore. So if there are no further questions, I'd like once more to thank our guest, Ulrika Richardson. Thanks very much, and best of luck, including meeting the head of BINU tomorrow, in fact. So have a great weekend. And for those of you in this room, the next speaker will be the spokesperson for the President of the General Assembly, Polina Kubiak. Come on up.